My name is George Robertson. I'm otherwise known as Lord Robertson of Port Ellen, and my job is to be Secretary General of NATO. I was born 56 years ago in a police station in a tiny village called Port Ellen on the island of Islay on the west of Scotland, which is internationally known because it has 7 malt Scotch whisky distilleries on the island. But I abandoned the route of my grandfather and my father and my brother and my son, and did not become a policeman. I became a politician, and I now head the world's most successful security and defence alliance. I came into politics very early. My family thought far too early because the American nuclear submarine base came beside my home in Dunoon on the west of Scotland, and I started my political career by demonstrating in the streets against the arrival of the American nuclear submarines, which makes it slightly ironic that today I'm in charge of this great military alliance. But I got into politics believing in world peace, and I'm still in politics believing in world peace and hopefully making the world a little bit safer. But I think NATO is even more relevant today than it was in 1949 when it was set up. It was then set up as an organization of democracies, protecting themselves against what looked like the domino effect of the Soviet Union and Stalin's encroachment on the rest of Europe. And it stood firm for 40 years against the possibility that the Soviet Union might do what Stalin wanted to do. So at the end of the 40 years, you might have said that NATO was out of business because the enemy was out of business. But the fact was that, as we now know, the world actually became much more complicated and not less complicated when the Berlin Wall came down. There were new democracies, new countries escaping communism, and they needed some help through the transition, and NATO was there to help them. It created a structure, a framework in which they could develop and modernize their militaries in order to become contributors to security instead of people threatening that security. And then, of course, 5 years after the end of the Cold War came Bosnia, the unraveling of a state with hideous violence, horrible tortures and concentration camps and cattle trucks all over again. And the only organization people could turn to stop it was NATO and its military organization. So it stopped a war in Bosnia. NATO has a competence to deal with security situations, military situations, but also to actually reshape the security environment so that the world becomes safer. 26 countries will be in NATO next year. That's 26 countries, remarkable countries, east and west, north and south, who simply won't go to war again. That's progress. Well, life is livable for me because I feel I'm making a contribution. I've always been in politics since the age of 15 because I thought that I could help to make the world a better place, my country a better place, my community a better place. So I serve in NATO as I served as a very lowly official in other jobs because I think I'm making that contribution. And when I sit here and I take part in activities, I like to think to myself that with other people, I'm making the world slightly safer. So that makes life livable for me. Nothing makes life unlivable for me. I am an optimist by nature. What I do enthuses me and gives me a feeling of hope. What depresses me is that in the world there is still so much violence, so much hatred, so much persecution going on of people, so much corruption undermining democracy. But, you know, I don't say it's all bad and therefore I should give up. I do my job in the hope that I can help to sort that situation, and that's what motivates me and keeps me going. I think happiness is being content with yourself. I've had a very fortunate life, and I've got a wonderful family, and they've made their contribution, and through them, I hope I've made a contribution to civilizing the community. For many people, unhappiness is to be deprived of the right to live in peace and freedom, the right to live in a society that believes in the rule of law. I think that is something that breeds unhappiness, and I long for the day when people can enjoy what I've enjoyed for the whole of my life, and that is the right to speak and to be heard in a democratic society. It may sound funny when I say that the most interesting thing that I think's happened to me is surviving a car crash in 1976. It was a terrible crash. A British Navy Land Rover ran into the front of my car. I was very, very fortunate to be alive. I was within a fraction of a millimetre of either being dead or living my life in some mechanical contraption. And that changed my life because it refreshed me, and every time I feel overtired, overburdened, or angry or frustrated, I take out the photograph of that car crash, and it reminds me how lucky I am to be alive. It's a photocopy of the police photograph of my car, and I carry it with me all the time, but in recent years I haven't had to look at it very often, but it does remind me that I'm very, very fortunate to be alive. Well, I think that probably was among the worst things that's happened to me, and I think I've made a few mistakes along the line. Of that, there is no doubt. But I think in life, you've got to put the mistakes behind you, quickly learn the lessons, and move on. If you become preoccupied with that, then you will simply get yourself bogged down. Looking forward is my philosophy in life. My fear is that the world could fall into chaos, that the trends that we've tried to tame, the wild forces that are around could actually come to dominate life. But I'm still optimistic that they won't, but certainly there is the possibility in the highly technical and increasingly smaller world that could happen, and that worries me, but it also motivates me as well. I wish in many ways that my life continues to be happy and contented. I wish that my family is able to grow up in a world as fortunate as the world that I grew up in as well. And if I've been able to make a contribution to that, then good. But that's what I would wish mainly for the next generation, that they have the same good fortune to live in peace and democracy as I did. I don't think I can really answer that question off the top of my head. I find it hard enough to be who I am at the present moment without speculating about people I would love to be. Love means the affection of human beings towards each other. I love my family, and I think that I can also feel a sense of love for the world in general and for people in general. I try to be generous to people, but I don't always succeed. I have 3 children and 1 grandson. It's an easy question, but it's not an easy reply, and the answer to it is I don't know. I'm not religious. It's a great mystery. I don't know, but I'm always willing to be persuaded. No expectations after death, and I think you live every moment that you've got. Having had a few scares in my life, I've learned to take life as it comes, enjoy it when it's there, contribute as much as you can, and don't think about an afterlife. I have no particular belief in the afterlife. My favourite writer is the poet Robert Burns. He was a Scottish poet and songwriter, but he's also the property of international mankind as well. And of all the poems that I love most, the one to a mouse sums up Burns and sums up the dilemma that we are often faced with. He wrote a poem to a small animal, the very lowest in the animal chain, and he spoke with great love and great affection. But one line in that poem, in the broad Scots, sums up what I've thought of life, and that is, the best laid plans of mice and men gang aft a gley. And in English that means the best prepared plans of both mice and men can often go astray. And that is very true, written 200 years ago or said today. My question to the people who are watching this video is, how much effort, how much are you willing to spend to make sure that your children and their children's children enjoy the peace and security that you've enjoyed?